All right. Well, in the Halitics, I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking to you. It is Wednesday, hump day. And I always say I'm happy on Wednesday, kind of halfway through the week. And it's been a good week, I think, for Halitics. And despite tremendous pessimism, I'm very cautiously pessimistic about the situation in Gaza and the United States' continuing embrace of the genocidal Jewish state. It's just such a rending dynamic to watch and to see so many lawmakers from both parties. We're going to focus perhaps a little more on the Democrats today, who have simply flunked completely the moral test of our time. They've completely failed to acknowledge Israel's crimes. They continue to defend, to justify the unjustifiable, the most cruel, the most sadistic crimes we've seen in our lifetime, unless you lived through the World War II genocide by the Nazis. We haven't seen anything quite on this scale, especially perpetrated by the United States. You really have to go back. I guess you could certainly look at Cambodia, right? I mean, we killed millions of people. The United States has done terrible, terrible things, but this is right there. I mean, this is right. In terms of the number of dead, we're not seeing the numbers in the millions the way we did after Nixon bombed Cambodia. We're not seeing the same numbers we saw as a result of W's war on the people of Iraq. But this is genocide to a degree that those war crimes were not. So we're seeing the worst that can happen. And there's just seems to be zero outcry or virtually nil from either party. Maybe that's a little bit unfair, but it's not very unfair. It's only a little bit unfair. If you want to join me, 240-242-5646, 240-242-5646. Please don't forget, click the subscribe button, bottom right of your screen, blue and white square. Would love to have you be part of the Halitics family, yeah, if I can call it that. And that also includes our Facebook page. Join Halitics on Facebook for the group conversations there, the back and forth. And really, I'm pleased. I feel like we're getting to a place where there's more dialogue, more discussion, more willingness to listen to other people's perspectives, even if they're on the other side of the political divide right now that rends us the Democratic Republican divide. Now, I'm not on either side. I'm against both, but most of the posters tend to, I think, fall into one of those two camps. And I'm glad to see at least there seems to be some, maybe a little bit of conversation, a little bit of dialogue that there hasn't been. That's what we are striving for. That is what we're striving to accomplish. And again, I've talked about this several times. I'm bringing it up again. I feel really bad about comments I made about the late Charlie Kirk in the wake of his assassination, because they were divided people that I'm trying desperately to bring together. And of course, that was my issue with Kirk, right, is that he was a divider. On the other hand, he was bringing folks together, at least at the very end of his life. He seemed to be embracing a much more skeptical view of Israel than he had previously, and that was a way to build a coalition of poor, struggling, working, and middle-class people. All of us in agreement that Israel's actions are just beyond the pale, just totally unacceptable. And not, I would say unacceptable, like they're rude, crude. They're criminal, their murder, their homicide on a mass scale. That's what we have to grapple with, and that's what we failed to grapple with. Today's program, I do want to give a shout to, I believe it's the Young Turks. I think that's where I first became apprised of the video involving the I've Had It, and this is Jennifer Welch. I've got her in my thumbnail. So we're going to play clips of this in a little bit. I'm going to start with the New York Times, though, and why, by the way, very good op-ed or opinion piece in the New York Times. Very, very good piece shockingly good, surprisingly good in the New York Times from a Palestinian perspective, and why the woman who is interviewed is so heartbroken, despite the fact that, at least for now, the bombs aren't falling. I mean, that's the one good thing. But again, just real quick, yeah, I was just taken by this video that Jennifer Welch did, the Anti-Cult Club. She got Cory Booker on, and she presents herself as this left progressive Democrat. She has some kind words for Bush, not Bush, Booker, kinder words than I would have for Cory Booker, but she really does expose him. And I thought it was very, very instructive the way she asks him about Netanyahu and the failing of the Democratic Party, the failings of Democratic Party legislators to acknowledge and confront this great evil. We're also going to look at Maryland legislators, a senator and a delegate in the State House, who have completely flunked the moral test of our time. We'll get into that as well. But let's start with a discussion in the New York Times from today's paper, which really does set out better than I could, but very clearly, I think concisely expresses the concerns I've had, puts them into words in a bit more, I believe, articulately than I do, but also adds to my understanding of why this is so problematic. And yes, I'm glad the bombs aren't falling right now, but that's as far really as the happiness can go. So from the New York Times, and they call it an opinion piece, but this is more factual than virtually anything in the newspaper. It's an interview with Diana Buttu, I believe it's pronounced, who is a Palestinian living in Israel. What Trump's peace deal really means for Gaza: the war might have ended, one lawyer argues, but the occupation remains. No question about that. Let's get into the actual text, the actual answers that Ms. Buttu, I believe is how you would pronounce it. I hope I got that right. If I didn't, I apologize. Ms. Buttu, how she responds to the New York Times interviewer, who really does, I think, get the answers that we need to hear from Diana Buttu, but he does it by repeating, the Zionist talking points, the Hasbara. He does his best to cape for Bibi. There's no question about it. But the truth is so powerful that even those journalists, and I'm not saying this guy is, I'm sure he's not in the pay of Israel or in one of its, cutouts, those people we talked about yesterday who have hired New York Times journalists to teach classes in how to promote the Israeli viewpoint. I don't know that this journalist fits into that category. Let's hope not, the one who wrote this piece and interviewed Diana Buttu. But here's what she has to say. I have a lot of friends in Gaza. I lived there for a year and a half, and it's been such a hard 2 years because over the course of them, I didn't have words, right? This is how lives felt. I used to say, I don't have words to express how horrible this is, how evil it is. I didn't know what to say to them. Of course, what can you say? She is totally helpless. And then goes on to say, when I checked in on my friends, their reactions were mixed. Everyone had their home destroyed. Everyone was displaced more than once. Everyone had at least one member of their family killed. So those are the victims, right? I mean, they're the ones who are still alive, but their family members killed. Ari, by the way, posting that Israel's already demanding that dead bodies be retrieved that are buried under the rubble that they created. Yeah, Israel is so untrustworthy. You cannot believe a word that they say. You cannot take them at their pledge. That's why this is so problematic. That's why this is so unfortunate. And Diana Buttu gets to that. She makes that point, why we cannot be really, feel any real sense of relief, even just in the moment, right? Just in the moment. It's sort of like a family that's living on the very edge of eviction, and they get a reprieve. They get a $100 lottery win, something of that nature, or the mom finds work, temporary work. She gets a paycheck, so they're able to stave off the eviction for another month. But who knows what will happen in 30 days? And of course, in Palestine, in Gaza, it could be next minute, next hour, when the Israeli military again launches a genocidal pogrom against the people of Palestine. So the New York Times interviewer Wakin says, I hear you about, how bad things were, but yes, this is a deeply flawed agreement, but would it have been better to not reach an agreement at all and stop the killing because not every aspect was included? And she says, well, we can't look at it that way. There was a way to stop the killing, and there was a way to address the root causes, but that's not what happened here. And in fact, she points out what we've said on Halitics. The killing has not stopped. The bombs have not been falling lately, which, by the way, is confirmed for me from my correspondent in Gaza on Facebook, that the bombs haven't been falling, but the killing hasn't stopped either, just the numbers. So again, Israel looking to every opportunity to kill Gazans, to kill Palestinians. And Boodoo makes a really important point here. I don't think she's correct in what she says. I'm going to respond to it, but it's still really, really important. There's something troubling about this agreement, and it's the fact that Palestinians had to negotiate it. It's never been in history that people need to negotiate an end to genocide. And it shouldn't be, right? I mean, what Israel has done is commit the ultimate crime. It is, in the fact, committing the ultimate crime against the people of Palestine. So why does Palestine have to make all these concessions and say, well, we're going to stop, we're going to move out, and we're going to this, and we're going to do that? Why should they have to give up anything? Obviously, because there's a gun at their head and they have no choice. I mean, it's basically either we kill you or you do everything we want and we still might kill you. And that's kind of the Hobson's choice Israel gave Gaza. So it's totally wrong. The pressure should have been, Israel should have just been stopped. We could have stopped Israel. Harris Biden could have stopped Israel. Trump did stop Israel and then gave them a green light and waved a red flag in front of them, like a matador kind of thing with a bull. So it's totally horrific what's happened. And the idea that this is something to celebrate if you're Palestinian, the only thing is, well, hopefully a bomb won't fall on my hovel, on my tent tonight, in my refugee camp, hopefully. What Boodoo says, though, I don't believe is accurate. It's just never been in history that people need to negotiate an end to genocide. Well, that's not true. For example, the genocide of the American Indian was accompanied by many negotiations by the native tribes here, the indigenous peoples. There were many instances where they negotiated with the white man, where there were agreements. Well, we'll move over to this part of we'll move west of the Mississippi, or we'll move from Seminole ancestral lands in Florida to the Cherokee Reservation in Oklahoma, what became Oklahoma. And then just don't kill us. And of course, they were still killed, right? The land kept being taken away, and deal after deal was violated by the United States. So yes, people have in the past tried desperately to negotiate ways out of genocide. And I think I've discussed on this program the Malian Dialogue, where the people of the island of Milos were in conversation with the Athenian Navy about whether they should all be killed or not, and what they could or could not do to avoid genocide. In the end, they said, well, since there's nothing we can do, you're going to kill us no matter what we do. We're just, go ahead, do it, but you have to defeat you'll have to scale our walls. And of course they did. They sieged them. They besieged the city and then killed all the men and enslaved the women and children. So, so there are plenty of instances, right, throughout history where besieged people have, in fact, tried to negotiate an end to genocide. The fear, and it's a very, very good, legitimate, correct fear, is that unlike in the aftermath of the Holocaust, the Shoah, where the perpetrators were held responsible, were tried, and many of them were executed, where some had already committed suicide beforehand, that's not happening here. There's no trial of Netanyahu. There's no trial of Smotrich and Ben-Gvir. They're still large and in charge, despite the fact that they have committed a genocide. They're in the midst. I mean, it's not over, right? Because they're still Palestinian people. But from their perspective, clearly the goal, which they had to a significant degree accomplished, was just to wipe these people off the planet. So, of course, there's terrible fear, trepidation. This is why I'm not going to give Trump really any credit at all. I mean, I guess, yeah, the bombs have stopped for now. Will they start again? And again, Butu making the points, right? Of course, she's spot on. I mean, and I'm glad she did this. She's extremely persuasive, articulate. She makes the case. There's no argument. But it's really not rocket science. We all see this. We all get it. If you don't get it, it's because you just don't want to. You don't want to accept that Israel is an evil country. You just don't want to accept it. The argument, we'll see this guy in Maryland, Ben Kramer. They're a democracy. Doesn't that make it 10 times worse? That they're a democracy? That they're committing this apparently with the support of the Israeli people? At least the Germans could plausibly say, hey, we didn't vote for Hitler but that one time, and even then only 33% of us did. Netanyahu has repeatedly been reelected. Yes, he's had to put together coalition governments, but the coalition governments come together because the elected members of the Knesset ultimately agree to vote for Netanyahu to be the prime minister, vote for the Likud party to run the country. So there's no excuse. The way the Germans had the excuse, well, we didn't know how bad it was going to be, and once he was in power, we couldn't do anything about it. Very, very, very terrifying situation. It's as bad as it gets. 240-242-5646, 240-242-5646. Yeah, I'd love to talk to you because I just don't have answers. I wish I did. I just can tell you how bad things are. And let me just one more quote here. We're going to get to first U.S. Senator Cory Booker, and then later some of the Maryland representative and senator who really, again, I don't want to say broke my heart, just incredibly upsetting the way they've responded. One more point, why we're so concerned here. No guarantees. There's no guarantee that Israel isn't going to resume. And, they keep peeling away. Oh, well, you got to give us more bodies and you got to do this. And yeah, we're sorry that kid got killed by that, that explosive toy we left behind. That's a story that's, we've seen that there are reports, now Israel denies them, reports that the Israeli military has left explosive toys behind. And apparently that has happened. Israel denies it, of course. Everyone always denies everything, but look at Israel's record. Are they trustworthy? Are they credible? Can you believe them? I mean, doesn't the question answer itself? 240-242-5646. 240-242-5646. I want to play. So I mentioned to you the podcast, and I think they do a really good job. Jennifer Welch, I've seen several of her podcasts. It's called I've Had It. She has a co-host. I'm not familiar with the co-host, but it's interesting that we've seen Democrats, including now Cory Booker, going on this podcast. We've seen Alyssa Slotkin from Michigan going on Breaking Points, and this is part of the new Democratic strategy. We're going to go on new media. We're going to talk to the younger folk who watch podcasts, who don't watch Meet the Press. We're going to meet you halfway. But what they are incapable of doing is actually reconsidering their horrific policies. They're just going to try to, again, spin what they do, but not actually change what they do. And I hope we're not going to fall for this crap. No, I hope we're not going to buy the snake oil that these really horrible, sociopathic people sell. Here's Booker. Let me right here. So he's going to, I guess, start telling us about, I don't know, something about Netanyahu or something. This is about Netanyahu, and Jennifer Welch asks him a really pointed question. But before we get to it, he's going to kind of give a whole bunch of rigmarole about his relationship with the Israeli killer-in-chief.
Netanyahu. Outrageous things that he's doing. The way you fight for those things is you sit down face to face with somebody and you fight with them.
So is that what you would have done with Hitler? It's funny because he says that the way you fight with outrageous things is you sit down face to face. It's funny because in 1938, Hitler met with, the premier of France, still, I think it was Daladier, maybe, could be wrong about that, and the prime minister of the UK, Chamberlain, and they basically said you can have what you want. You can have Czechoslovakia, and that's widely considered that act of appeasement. Basically led to World War II. They didn't stop Hitler when they could have. So people are saying, no, you shouldn't have talked to Hitler. You should have told Hitler this is what's going to happen. Booker's saying, oh no, we sit down and we have a conversation. You're having conversation with a monster. You tell him. You don't talk it out. But Booker doesn't want to, acknowledge it. I want to say that. He's the AIPAC guy. Unlike Slotkin, who stopped taking money from AIPAC, Booker continues to take money from AIPAC.
Out of the room screaming. I want to look him in the eye, like me, Amy Klobuchar, and a whole bunch of other people did, and talk to him about humanitarian aid. And if people want to...
you talked to him, and how did that go? How did that work? Did you get the humanitarian aid that you were hoping to get from him? I'm just curious, Booker, because it sure didn't look like it. It's kind of amazing that you say we sat down with we looked him in the eye. And here's the picture, by the way. You can see Klobuchar there. She's kind of ducking behind one of the, I guess that's a Republican with white hair. See Netanyahu in the middle. And Booker's off to the side. He's a little embarrassed. Maybe he doesn't quite know how good it is to be in that picture. But that meeting, it's really a laugh riot. It would be funny if it weren't so horrible that Booker's saying, well, that meeting kind of held Bibi's feet to the fire. Not at all. It totally, it empowered him. It gave him more stature. Hey, I get all these, senators, and they didn't do anything. They didn't hold me accountable in any real way. There was no cutoff of aid. There may have been a few threats, but nothing actually happened that was a problem for Israel. Only Trump, and really, I don't, again, we have to be very, very concerned that this deal that Trump pushed through will end at any moment. But Booker somehow taking credit for giving Netanyahu increased stature by giving him increased gravitas on the world stage by meeting with him. It's quite a feat there, quite a spin
for it. Then go ahead. But I'm leading in the Senate on West Bank crises right now, from their attempts to annex it or illegal settlements. I lead the legislature.
It's a joke that he says that. The settlements continue unabated. There's no stop whatsoever. Israel has gone in and just simply destroyed villages completely in recent months. This statement by Booker, I'm leading the fight to preserve the West Bank. That's kind of reminiscent, is it not, of the AOC statement, Kamala's working tirelessly for a ceasefire. Well, if that's what you're doing, you've completely failed. You've had zero impact. Every day things get worse, Booker, for the people in the West Bank.
Legislation to sanction the people that are doing that. I can stand strong on my principles and still work to end these things. And I don't mind taking criticism, from folks that don't necessarily agree with my tactics.
I love the way these politicians also, they just never stop talking, blah, blah, blah. Because he knows any question he's asked will put him on the spot, where he doesn't want to be. And she will ask him, she's listening. You can see she's like, come on. Welch is the one on the left. As you're looking at the screen, she's at Booker's right.
Podcast right now, we share the same aim. Ceasefire now, humanitarian aid now, return the hostages now. And I'm
do you think he's a war criminal, Benjamin Netanyahu? Do you think he's a war criminal?
Right, very simple question, and really an important question too, right? I mean, if he's a war criminal, why are you negotiating? Why aren't you just saying this is what you have to do? Sometimes you negotiate with war criminals because they have bigger guns and they have more powerful armies on the ground, and you're dependent on them to a degree. That's not the case with Israel. Israel is our client state. Israel has to do what we want. So it's really important. If Netanyahu is, as we all know, not just a war criminal, but a genocider, then you have an absolute moral obligation to go out every single day. Go on NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, every station you can get on, every podcast, and say Israel is led by a maniac. Israel is led by a mass murderer. Israel is led by a war criminal. We must unite against him. And by the way, if you did that, Booker, you would find an incredibly welcome audience. Some people all over this country who share those concerns. Look at how Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA started to turn against Israel because of pressure. This is very conservative students. Pressure from them against Israel. And yet you can't even be bothered by that question. Is Netanyahu a war criminal? Let's hear it again. Let's hear it again.
Ceasefire now, humanitarian aid now, return the hostages now. Do you
think he's a war criminal, Benjamin Netanyahu? Do you think he's a war criminal?
Again, these are questions that a lot of people think are the important litmus tests that are loaded and hot.
It's such an either he is or he isn't. He's waged war for 2 years, totally unjustifiably. He has killed thousands, tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of civilians, women and children, deliberately targeting them. Unhoused millions. Is this that hard? Now, you can say it's a litmus test. It's a really important, it is a litmus test. If you can't say yes, of course he's a war criminal, then you have no business being in the U.S. Senate. But we don't live in a democracy where the people would actually rebel against this kind of BS.
My urgency is to be an effective leader in bringing an end to this crisis.
Okay, so you know how you bring an end to the crisis? You know how you end the crisis, Booker? You say, yeah, you're a war criminal. We're referring you to The Hague for prosecution. That's the way. In fact, I distinctly recall during the early months of the Israeli genocide campaign, the reprisals, the early months, a commenter, I think it was Chris Hedges, said that the one thing, maybe it wasn't Hedges, I'm not sure who it was, the thing, what scares Israel more than anything else, or what scares Netanyahu and the Israeli leadership more than anything else, is being arrested, is being held to account, is being recognized as the criminals that they are, the murderers that they are. I think, that fact is what you have to bear in mind when you're saying, well, what can we do to stop Israel? What Booker is saying is, hey, my focus isn't on, well, was he a war criminal or isn't he? Is it a genocide or isn't it? No, I just want to stop the killing. Well, the way you stop the killing is to cut Israel off, which you didn't vote for. And yes, you do. You refer Netanyahu to the International Criminal Court for prosecution for murder, for genocide. That would stop Israel. So if you really cared about stopping Israel, that's what you would do. But you don't care about stopping Israel, so you claim to care about Israel. You claim to care about Gaza. You obviously don't care about stopping the killing. You claim to, and you use that false claim, that bogus claim, so that you can excuse not doing the one thing that actually would stop Israel. So, it's just lie. It's just a flat out despicable lie. And, again, we have to say to ourselves, how can we stop this? How can we stop this? 240-242-5646, 242-5646. I was just trying to figure out what the exact date was of this interview, because it's as though they, there wasn't a ceasefire, but it was published yesterday, October 14th. I should have told you that, but I knew it was really, really recent. I wanted to get the exact. So this interview is yesterday, and I think, or at least it was released, probably it was a few days earlier that they actually spoke to Booker. My guess is that they recognize that the ceasefire now is very tenuous, could end at any time, that Israel could revert right back to its murderous ways. And so for that reason, they're talking about long-term ways to solve the crisis. But the real solution is the one that Booker utterly refuses to embrace. So, yeah, this is your Democratic Party. This is a morally bankrupt party. I want to play a little more because I thought Welch made a good answer when he started saying, I don't believe in, talking about genocide. It's not, it's just a litmus test. It doesn't really help us move the ball forward. And so let me play a little more.
Do you think he's a war criminal, Benjamin Netanyahu? Do you think he's a war criminal?
Again, these are questions that a lot of people think are the important litmus tests that are loaded and hot. My urgency is to be an effective leader in bringing an end to this crisis. And I get these questions all the time that, to me, undermine my urgency.
I think the thing that Democrats get so frustrated with, where we are right now, where you see like the Zoran Mamdanis and the Graham Plattners rise up, because they can go on podcasts and you can say, do you think Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal? And they just say, yes. And that's the end of it. It's not all of the rhetoric answering. It's like what happens to Democratic politicians, they go through this like prism.
I want to just stop it there for a sec, because I also want to get Booker's response. But she's saying, hey, what really frustrates so many of us is that we ask a question, and instead of getting a straight answer, we get a lot of double talk and gobbledygook, which we certainly got from Kamala all the time, which is why she didn't win. Why? I believe very firmly, all this, she was dealt a bad hand, she got the late start. All of that was to her benefit. People don't like Harris. The more they get to know her, the more they dislike her. It was an advantage for Kamala Harris to get the nomination at the beginning of the summer with only a few months until the election. So people would have less time to tire of her, to grow, to lose the little glow that she got from the replacing Biden. All she had to do was to present a few popular policies that she was going to call for, promote, and to separate herself from Biden, especially on his support for the genocide. That's all she had to do, and she couldn't do it. She never did it. She wouldn't do it. And people hated that. And that's why she lost. And that's precisely why Cory Booker is a terrible, terrible politician who you should not vote for under any circumstances, because he has asked a simple, easy to understand question that is very, very important for us to grapple with. If the Democratic Party is going to be a party of our moral conscience, then it must come to terms with the fact that one of our closest allies is run by a genocidal maniac, a monster, a sociopath. Maybe he's not a maniac. I don't think he's insane. He's a sociopath. He's evil. And we must separate ourselves from him forcefully. That's essential if the Democratic Party wants to win elections. Cory Booker smirking there, smiling as she's saying, hey, we're sick of it. We're sick of the gibberish, the double talk, the failure to answer, the lawyerly commentary. We can't stand it. We want straight answers. That's why we're supporting people like Mamdani and Plattner. And I want to add to that. I think that's such an important point. I think it's also not just that they do seem a little bit more authentic, a little bit more human, meaning people like Mamdani and Plattner, but also the policies that they're talking about are a little closer to where we are. We want so badly, we're so desperate for something better, for a change from this horrible place we're in now between the Scylla and Charybdis of politics, the Democrats and the Republicans, two monstrous parties, two evil entities. We're so desperate for that. So we overlook, real legitimate questions about Mamdani. Why is he sort of centering the concerns of the Zionists? Why is he talking about problems with Hamas? That's not the issue. The issue is the Israeli genocide. There are real, I don't want to push the billionaires out of New York. It seems like his message is being muted, is being watered down. So we are concerned, obviously, but we want so desperately to have someone who's on our side. And they're just like, the Palestinian, we heard from that, the lawyer, Badu, in the first segment here, that she just wanted so badly to be able to give some comfort to people who are left, behind. But there isn't any. And so we're desperate to think, maybe a Mamdani can provide us with some comfort. The people who vote and continue to vote for AOC are so desperate to believe, she's really on my side, even though she tells us that Mark Kelly, who says that Kamala would be a really strong candidate for president in 2028, even though she calls Mark Kelly I believe, fantastic senator, even though she speaks the world of Ruben Gallego, who is an AIPAC darling now, an Israeli darling at this point, I believe. We still want to believe maybe she's on our side.
Ever get like the answer to yes or no conversations like you do with Bernie and others. And
it's like he's smiling. It's like, why are you smiling? She's saying to you, Booker, you're just a slime. You're sleazy. You're a evader. You're an avoider. You can't answer questions. Why are you smiling at that? There's something like messed up there. There's something missing. He doesn't understand how upsetting it is to deal with these kind of sleazeballs. And we'll get to him in a bit, but remember her question. Jennifer Welch's question was, is Netanyahu a war criminal? Very important question. If he's a war criminal, then your duty is to refer him for criminal prosecution to The Hague, to stop immediately all support for Israel. And that's what the Democrat Party needs to do, to unite against Israel. So it's a really important question. It's not a litmus test. I guess it is a litmus test. It's either you're a decent person or you're not. But the question, very, very clearly, is Netanyahu a war criminal? And for some reason, when she calls him out for refusing to answer, he thinks that's amusing. What's the matter with him?
For the Democratic
do I think Netanyahu is worse than Trump? Yes.
That wasn't the question. I'm going to give you the answer you want. Do I think he's worse than Trump? Yes. That wasn't the question. The question was, is he a war criminal? Which Trump is too. No. And so is, by the way, Biden, Harris.
It's like you do with Bernie and others. And that's the frustration.
The yes or no that you want. Here's the yes or no that you want. He says that. So, yes, he's a war criminal, or no, he's not.
Like you do with Bernie and others. And that's the frustration for the Democratic base with leadership.
Do I think Netanyahu is worse than Trump? Yes. Do I think that we right now in America should be doing everything possible to bring peace, not just to that crisis, but to the ones that shock me?
All right, and then he's going to distract and start talking about other problems around the world, which is true. It's true. There are terrible crimes going on all over the world that we should be addressing. That's a fair point. But a big reason we're not is because we're spending so much time, so much energy, so much money on these conflicts that we should have stopped years and years ago. That we should have stamped out Israel's behavior years and years and years ago. Look, Booker's awful. We all know it. We all understand it. He is emblematic of his party. He represents not just the worst elements of the party, the party. This is who they are. And I'm going to, focus now a little bit on some Maryland leaders. I've been working, with groups in my home state now, Maryland, to try to get some recognition by the Democratic lawmakers here. It's an all Democratic state of just how terrible what Israel's doing is, and also to take action, to stop the support that the state has for Israel. And obviously, it's mostly falling on not just deaf ears, but very hostile ears. So here's Ben Kramer. He's a senator, I believe. He's a state senator in my county, Montgomery County. This is from his letterhead, and this is a letter that he sent out to a constituent, not a constituent, to a Marylander who sent a letter to one of his fellow senators, Cheryl Kagan, who's also a huge, staunch Israel supporter, that was very critical, said you shouldn't have gone to Israel. You shouldn't have gone to Israel. And so here's Kramer's incredibly aggressive, indeed violent response. So the constituent Kaplan wrote a letter to Kagan saying, why'd you go to Israel? You shouldn't have gone to Israel. That was wrong. And then he says, when you criticize Israel for the genocide we all know is happening, you're relying on misinformation, disinformation of those who dream of Israel's destruction. You know what they dream of, Kramer? They dream of not being bombed. They dream of not having their children come home with bullets in their heads. That's what they dream of. The projection is so extraordinary. It's the Israelis. And I guess they're Jewish allies, and not just Jewish, they're Zionist allies in this country who dream of wiping the Palestinians off the face of the map. That's what's going on here. And then he says, I thought this was kind of ironic. He says, I'm going to give this brief reply. I'm going to give you a brief reply. Brief. This is how brief it is. 3 full single-spaced pages. I'm not going to. There's the brief reply. That sure doesn't look brief. That sure doesn't look brief. He sure had a lot of, he really wanted to get out his anger at the people being shot and bombed. He's really mad at those people whose homes are being destroyed. Yeah. I'm going to give you an earful or an eyeful. You called Kagan's visit to Israel unconscionable. No, Ms. Kaplan, I say in high dudgeon. What is unconscionable? Is Hamas burning babies alive, raping women, slaughtering families, and kidnapping innocents. Okay, obviously, 2 years later, Kramer continues to repeat the lie of babies being burned alive. That just didn't happen. We know that didn't happen. It's been repeatedly shown that did not occur. Nor were there any rapes confirmed. That was studied and debunked by a conservative outlet, the Times of London. There was a lot of killing on October 7th, just as there's been lots and lots of killing for decades and decades of innocent families by Israel. And my understanding is, yes, there were some innocent people who were kidnapped on October 7th, also many soldiers. There were many police. Many of the enforcers of the Israeli occupation were also targeted by Hamas. Daring to defend itself, Israel has created so much ill will. So many people now, so many more people now see it for exactly what it is: a violent, murderous state on a rampage, that there are many, many more people now than there ever were who are sworn to its destruction. It isn't about defending itself. It's about violence at all costs, is what Israel clearly has committed itself to. And Ben Kramer completely missing that, completely in denial of that reality. This is a state senator. He's supposed to represent everyone in his district, right? Which includes Muslims, includes Christians, atheists, peace advocates, all of them. You would think, would you not? By the way, he mentions Yom Kippur. That's the Day of Atonement. You think that a Jew who's an unabashed, he says in the letter, I don't have the quote here, that he's a Zionist. You think somebody who's an unapologetic defender of Israel would acknowledge its victims, would acknowledge the pain it's caused, would say, yes, we have to do something to atone for this. Not one moment, not 1 second of reflection from this guy. You express concern for confiscate, like it's in quotes, confiscate Palestinian land. Well, with a tiny bit, let me educate you. You will learn that Israel came into control of the West Bank, the ancestral, by the way, I love this, the ancestral home of Jews. So therefore, because some Jewish tribes lived there, Semitic tribes lived there 2,000, 3,000 years ago, that means they get to kill and slaughter everyone who lives there now? They get to push them off the land that they're on now? That's the defense? They were used by by Jordan, and I guess, it says neighbors were used, and Egypt. Flash for you. There's been a peace agreement between Israel and Jordan to Israel's east, which is where the West Bank is, and Egypt to its southwest, which is where Gaza is. There's been peace since 1977-78, when the Camp David Accords were reached. That's almost 50 years ago. How does the fact that before then, Jordan and Egypt did launch attacks against Israel, often though Israel used those claimed or feigned attacks as pretext to launch wars directly against them. how does that mean it's okay for Israel now to seize farmers' lands, Palestinian land, to cut roads up, to impose checkpoints? None of it does. None of it does. Kramer's just lashing out straw arguments over and over. It's just so awful. This isn't elected. No one's going to hold him accountable. No one's going to say we need a new senator. He needs to go. The Democratic Party isn't going to say your policies, your positions are outside. Like they do with Mamdani. Oh no, does he believe in Israel as a Jewish state? He doesn't believe in that, or he doesn't think Israel has a right to exist. He's not a Democrat. That's what Kathy Hochul. I have great concerns about his positions on Israel. That's not okay. To say, yeah, Israel has to be a democratic. Israel has to give rights, political rights to everyone within its borders. That's not okay in the Democratic Party. But it's okay to defend stealing land on the basis that, 2,000 years ago, there were Jewish people there. So now some other Jewish people who probably had zero blood connection whatsoever, they're there now, so they get to keep it because 2,000 years ago there were Jews. That's an acceptable view in the Democratic Party. Palestinians see new Nakba in West Bank villages as demolitions return. Dateline October 14, 2025. This is what Israel is doing right now. I know people think, oh, you talk too much about Israel. Why does Israel matter so much? This reflects the complete moral and intellectual bankruptcy of both of our political parties. Nothing reflects the fail, and not just the parties, the newspapers, the institutions, the churches, the synagogues, all of them have failed completely this test. A test that only requires you to stand up for human rights, human dignity, for life itself. And they've all failed. I wish I had an answer. That's the problem. It's easy to condemn. I know people have said to me, well, you just complain. We're sick of it. I get it. Well, tell me what we should be doing. I'm going to tell you right now, vote for Green Party candidates. Don't vote for Ben Cramer. Don't vote for Cory Booker under any circumstances. I don't care if that means a Republican might get elected. It doesn't matter at this point. Why does it matter? Accompanying them were Israeli soldiers pouring into the village. This is in May. Forcing families out of their homes and driving livestock out into the open. By the end of May 5th, the town had been reduced to rubble. 4 mass demolitions conducted by Israeli forces this year. That's something Ben Cramer can't bring himself to condemn, acknowledge, criticize. Nothing. Do have some videos of ICE. I think we'll save those perhaps until Friday. Tomorrow we're going to be talking to Eric Watts. He's the author of Ghetto Boy, and we'll talk to him about that, what it's like growing up poor, black in Brooklyn in the 1970s and 80s. We'll talk to him about that and how he was able to make it. Should be a lot of really valuable and powerful testimony from somebody who experienced challenges that I've never had to face, and most of us, fortunately for ourselves, have not. He overcame them. It's quite extraordinary, quite an extraordinary story. That's tomorrow on Halitics with Eric Watts. I want to just get to one more lawmaker, though, in Maryland who just completely missed the boat. Ryan Spiegel, he's a state delegate also in Montgomery County. So he posted this on Facebook a couple of days ago. Like so many of my fellow Jews around the world, this morning I'm filled with a complicated mix of conflicting emotions, but I'm trying to focus on the feelings of, so collective joy and relief at what? At the return of all 20 of the living hostages. Okay, I mean, you can be happy about that. Could you spare even a word or two for the people of Gaza, who at least in the moment weren't getting bombed? Maybe show a little happiness for them? Well, let's find out. He doesn't center their pain, which, by the way, should be centered. Because not only because of the numbers, because you're looking at over 67,000 Gazans killed, but also because they're the victims of U.S. action. The United States and presumably Israel. Now, Spiegel, Jewish, right? I believe he's Jewish. I'm sure he's Jewish. He's an American. We're the ones responsible for the untold suffering, the unimaginable pain inflicted on Palestinian people and the people of Gaza specifically, but also the West Bank, but specifically now, let's talk about Gaza. We're responsible. So their pain we caused. Therefore, we should acknowledge it, especially again on the Day of Atonement. Well, this is not the Day of Atonement. But could you show a little joy and relief that at least for now, Americans and Israelis aren't killing Gazan civilians, women, children? Could you do that, Spiegel? Well, again, let's find out. He doesn't center them. He puts front and center the 20 hostages, not the millions of Gazans that Israel and the United States have been targeting. But he has a long post there on Facebook. And I went through it, and I've got it for you. So he sits there in the back of my synagogue Saturday morning, quietly reflecting, digesting the apparent agreement, final threads of judgment and atonement. You'd think the atonement part, where you try to rectify the harm that you've done, would come out here. Well, we did so much harm to Gaza. We've got to do something about it. No, there's not one moment. He mentions October 7th. That's all he mentions, October 7th, when the Jews were attacked. He calls it a war, not what it is, a slaughter. Spiegel, like Kramer, has lots of Muslim constituents, Christian constituents, Christians also victims of the Israeli pogroms and genocide. What does Spiegel continue with? Well, there was a time for that. There was a time for the war, and now apparently there's a time for peace. So he quotes Ecclesiastes, of course, from the song. Well, the Byrds use the lyrics for their use the Psalms, the Psalm from Ecclesiastes for their song "Turn, Turn, Turn." But he says, hey, there was a time for dying, meaning for the Palestinians to die, and a time for slaying, for the Israelis to slay. There was that time, but now maybe there's not that time. But there's no acknowledgement. Well, no, the killing was wrong. We shouldn't be doing it. We shouldn't have done it. A time for ripping. Yeah, you ripped that country wide open, didn't you? And again, after more than 3,000 years, despite it all, the people of Israel live. Well, the people in Israel are living. The people in Gaza are dying. And that's something that for whatever reason, and I don't know if you want to call it sociopathy, you want to call it brainwashing, you want to call it political expedience, Spiegel refuses to acknowledge. This is so wrong. It so reflects, again, a country, our country, a government that is adrift, that is untethered from where the people of the country are. And a party, in this case, where 7%, only 7% of voters support Israel. And yet, its electeds can't even be bothered to acknowledge the misery, the pain, the extraordinary afflictions that the United States and Israel have caused. It's horrific. This is when I again throw up my hands. I want answers. I don't get them. I don't blame you for not having the answers, because who does? And here's what Ari says in response to my comments about Charlie Kirk earlier. Kirk, in my opinion, is just one example that even deluded extremists see the beyond extreme delusion. Yeah, they're able. He couldn't shut his eyes to it anymore. What does that tell you about your Democratic Party? That Charlie Kirk began to really get it, and Maryland delegate Ryan Spiegel doesn't. That Maryland Senator, Democrat Ben Cramer doesn't. That New Jersey U.S. Senator Cory Booker doesn't get it. It says something really, really, really bad about them. I will be back tomorrow. We will have Eric Watts on. Looking forward to speaking about Ghetto Boy. And have a great afternoon. I want to thank all of you for being part of Halitics. I will get to, I promise, because I did want to talk about Chicago, the violence in the streets there, caused by the Republican President Trump, who is really that bad. I mean, this is, I get into how bad the Democrats are. Well, it's so frustrating because I don't want a loyal opposition. There's no opposition politically to the worst crimes of this administration. And in some ways, you can even make the argument, well, hey, I heard I think it was Sagar said on Breaking Points, I'm not even certain that if Harris had somehow beaten Trump, we would have that ceasefire now. As bad as the ceasefire is, I mean, I guess it's better than bombs falling. And Sagar said, I don't even know that Harris would have had the ability to broker that deal. And maybe he's right. Maybe he's right. That's sure is an indictment, is it not, of your Democratic Party. I'll be back tomorrow. Thank you so much for being